A serial rapist strikes in a suburb outside Toronto, Canada.
The nature of the beatings, what the victims had endured, clearly told us that we're dealing with a sexually sadistic offender.
Years later, a serial killer brutally targets young girls in another Canadian town.
It was gruesome. Who could kill a young teenage girl and dismember her body?
Fear sweeps across southern Ontario. The bloody trail leads police to a pair of unlikely suspects, a young, beautiful married couple.
The idea that these were the bad guys, that they were capable of doing anything so vile, is something that's hard for us to comprehend.
She assaulted her sister. It was absolutely mind-boggling.
It's the most sensational and probably one of the most sinister cases in Canadian history.
Oh, the way every hair on my body just stood up with that picture of Karla. That was a picture that they circulated. Oh, that picture. Listen, if you're Canadian or, of a certain age and you remember, this picture, this frame right here was circulated, was played on the news almost every day. Karla was no victim. Karla played victim, and she got a deal with the prosecution. Manslaughter instead of something else, okay? She got 12 years in prison, and she was let out. After they made that deal with her, but before Paul was sentenced, they find the tapes, the infamous tapes, the tapes of the crimes. And that's where they see she was no victim. Karla was not some DV victim. No. They could clearly see on those tapes that she was a willing and active participant in what they did to those three girls. So Canada, we call the deal that the government made with her, the prosecution, the deal with the devil. And to this day, it outrages us what a stupid deal the government made with her.
Cases in Canadian history.
Saturday, June 29th, 1991, at a quiet recreational area near the town of St. Catharines in Ontario, Canada, some fishermen make a horrifying discovery. At one end of Lake Gibson, they notice several concrete blocks partially submerged in the water. They take a closer look and are shocked to find what appear to be pieces of human flesh protruding from the cracks. Niagara Regional Police searched the murky waters for more clues. They find a total of 8 concrete blocks. Each contains body parts.
We believe the party to be a female, young female. It could be between 14 to 24 years of age.
The victim is identified as 14-year-old Leslie Mahaffey from the nearby town of Burlington. She had been missing for 2 weeks.
Burlington, Ontario, just for context. That's a good point. The tapes, this is how the tapes came about. The first lawyer, Paul Bernardo's first lawyer, hid the tapes. That lawyer also did jail time for having hid the tapes. They, got the new lawyer, and it's the second lawyer that handed over the tapes to the prosecution, to the court, right? So that first lawyer ends up going to jail. So his lawyer has shade on that side. And when Karla came out of prison, she ends up marrying the son of one of her lawyers. So just extremely fucked up lawyers on both sides.
The same day her body is found, a young couple exchange wedding vows 16 miles away in the quaint town of Niagara-on-the-Lake. Their fairy tale wedding is complete with a horse-drawn carriage.
At face value, it was a beautiful wedding, but if you talk to the friends and the relatives, everybody knew that it was just a big charade.
21-year-old Karla Homolka and 26-year-old Paul Bernardo appear to be the perfect couple, but friends and family suspect Paul has been unfaithful. What they don't know is far worse.
They do look ugly, in my opinion, during their wedding pictures too. There are much like, it's gross to say, but better looking pictures of the two of them from before this. But context of what's going on at the time of their wedding. Okay. Karla's sister was found dead. This is a few months before, only months before her wedding. And she complained that, when is my family going to get over her? Like, I want to get married. I want all the attention on me. So they end up, she like pushes her family in a way to go ahead with her wedding. They've already done all the sick shit. Everything is done. He was the Scarborough grapist before he even got with Karla. So he's done all those heinous grapes. And now they've already offed 3 children. And now they're getting married. So the sick that you see in both of their eyes, it's not for nothing.
April 16th, 1992. Less than a year after Paul and Karla's wedding, 15-year-old Kristen French goes missing from her hometown of St. Catharines.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's true. They hadn't done all of the offings yet, but all of the grapes had been done. Karla's sister had also been, as well as, who was the first one? I believe Leslie Mahaffey.
2 weeks later, on April 30th, 1992, Kristen's parents' worst fears are realized. A man searching for scrap metal finds the body of their daughter in a ditch on the side of the road in Burlington. Kristen had been sexually assaulted, beaten, and strangled. Her body was dumped less than a quarter-mile away from the cemetery where Leslie Mahaffey was buried a year earlier. Police consult with FBI profiler Greg McCrary. They suspect there may be a connection between the 2 young murder victims.
Those crimes are very unusual, to abduct and murder young women. And there was a sort of a polarization here. One was abducted in Burlington and the body was in St. Catharines. The other was abducted in St. Catharines and the body was found in Burlington. It sort of connected the crimes geographically at that point.
The location of the bodies and the viciousness of the attacks lead police to suspect this is the work of an experienced killer.
This was no kid that was just starting a criminal career. This is somebody who had developed a degree of criminal sophistication over the years.
So before he even met Karla, when he was the Scarborough grapist, they know of, they call it over 20 women who were graped in Scarborough. That's just who has come forward, but they do think that there's more.
Police also believe the culprit may have an accomplice after eyewitnesses report seeing the victim talking to 2 people just before she disappeared. What no one could imagine is that police would eventually tie the crimes to these seemingly innocent, beautiful newlyweds.
They were attractive looking, they were intelligent, they were in love. The idea that these were the bad guys, that they were capable of doing anything so vile, is something that's hard for us to comprehend.
Paul and Karla would be linked to not only the murders of Leslie Mahaffey and Kristen French, but also the killing of Karla's own sister and the rapes of more than a dozen other women in southern Ontario. Their story would generate headlines around the world about the systematic failure of police to catch them and the couple's intense obsession with each other. When Karla Homolka first met Paul Bernardo, she was a 17-year-old high school student who worked part-time at a pet store. He was 23, training to be an accountant, and would soon graduate from the University of Toronto. October 17th, 1980.
Yes, Jessica, the whole story takes place in Ontario. It's all different cities in Ontario.
Karla is attending a pet food convention in the town of Scarborough, outside of Toronto.
Oh, freaking ads. Freaking ads. They break the whole momentum. Okay, no fires left behind. We wait. I have like sweat across my forehead. Wait, what? I feel attacked. He was an accountant. That means nothing. Okay, nothing at all. I'm getting like nervous just watching this. I haven't watched anything about them in quite a while, you know. They hook up the first night too. No judgment. I don't know. I don't think that means anything, you know. In the 80s, that was the look. This was 1991, but it's Canada, so small town Canada, you know. First ads during the fart, now during the explanation. I know. Twitch is doing us dirty. I don't know what to say. Ay. Hope the little fur babies are okay with the weather. I feel so bad for like the wild ones who live outside because there's no escaping it for them. But for pets, it's like for people at this point, they're telling everybody to stay inside as much as possible. Limit your time outdoors. The city has closed all like swimming pools, the soccer fields, and like baseball diamonds and basketball courts and stuff just around like public ones. Canceled all kinds of like outdoor activities. Everything's off because of the air quality, you know. Oh, it's over? Okay.
She and a coworker are having a late-night snack in a hotel restaurant when Paul walks in.
As soon as Paul Bernardo walked in the door and laid eyes on Karla Homolka, there was, as the friends describe it, there was electricity in the air. It was love at first sight or lust at first sight, whatever you want to call it.
Paul stands over 6 feet tall with boyish good looks and captivating charm. Karla is immediately attracted to his handsome appearance and his outgoing personality. Within hours, they are in her hotel room having sex.
My sense is that Karla was extremely insecure and was looking for a strong man.
Their intense attraction will eventually spiral out of control.
No, I mean, I don't know many details that say that they're not going to put in this, but just a small detail that I had heard about Karla was that it was more than just she was looking for a strong man. No. She was in some kind of a club, even in high school, all about finding an older, you know, somewhat wealthy, like an older guy, a guy with a car, a guy with a job. It was like a thing for her and a few of her friends. And then she met him, and he was a little bit older, had a job, or at least potential for a job, you know, that was just finishing school in accounting, had a car, was obsessed with her. So was, let's say, the initial attraction. But yeah, they were, like this guy's saying, like madly attracted to each other, but he just fit all the boxes that she was looking for.
With horrific consequences.
They call it a match made in heaven, but in this case, it was clearly a match made in hell.
October 1987, when 17-year-old Karla Homolka first met Paul Bernardo in Scarborough, Ontario, it was lust at first sight. Karla believed 23-year-old Paul was the man of her dreams. But he was a man with dark secrets, and she was a young woman who would do anything for him. The oldest of 3 daughters, Karla Homolka was a popular and pretty girl. She grew up in St. Catharines on the southern shore of Lake Ontario. In high school, Karla had several boyfriends, but no one like Paul Bernardo. He was 6 years her senior, and in her mind, the perfect catch. She bragged to friends about his maturity and good looks, and Paul was quite taken with Karla too.
It was a perfect match for Bernardo. He'd found his soulmate. He'd found the woman who would do anything.
I mean, she's no 10, but think for small town Ontario, no offense, small town Ontario. I'm just saying, when the population is low, there's only so many people in town. You look around, there's a young, you know, thin, athletic blonde with her blue eyes, and she's flirting it up. Yeah, she does come off as like the pretty girl in town, you know?
And ultimately, she did do anything.
The youngest of 3 children, Paul was a good-looking boy with dimples and a sweet smile. But behind the happy expression was a little boy who had a difficult childhood. His mother was verbally abusive. His father, Paul discovered, was not his biological parent. This startling revelation occurred when Paul was 16. Around that time, Paul began peeking through his female neighbors' windows as they undressed.
So what happened was Paul's 16 years old. His parents always fighting. They had like a history of, you know, a really shit relationship, his parents. 16 years old, his parents are fighting, and in the fight, it slips that you're a whore, you had an affair, Paul's not even my son. And that's how Paul Bernardo found out that like his dad's not his biological dad. Paul turns and immediately starts referring to his mother as a charmute and lots of other things. The mother turns around to Paul, and instead of being like, oh my God, I don't know, anything, any kind of like remorse or guilt or anything, she turns to him and said, and you're a bastard from hell. So yeah, not at all excusing Paul, but just to say he comes from a very fucked up place.
As he grew older, Paul's curiosity slowly escalated into something more aggressive.
It would appear there's something very different in terms of his sexual makeup. From what I can glean, he wasn't necessarily a man who was terribly aroused by consenting sexual activity.
Paul Bernardo tried to keep those sexual tendencies hidden. In September of 1983, he began taking classes at the University of Toronto at Scarborough. By all accounts, he was well liked by friends and neighbors.
One of the most horrifying things is that he seems so normal. I believe that this is quite common in psychopathic personalities. They are often very charming, entertaining, life of the party kind of people.
He had several girlfriends in college who said they broke up with him when their sexual relationships became abusive.
He become fixated almost on violence towards women and on conquering women, on going to discos and bars and getting them and having sex with them and getting them to do whatever he wanted.
In the spring of 1988, a sexual predator was roaming the streets of Scarborough. By May, there were already 7 attacks on women.
We're supposed to warn women not to travel alone at night.
The attacker would grab women as they got off the bus or walked through the park, pulling them behind bushes where he sexually assaulted them.
Why did it take so long for them to find the Scarborough rapist? Because he had a method purposely of attack where he would only ever attack from behind. So for years, nobody had like a good look at the face or a look at the face at all. The most that they had was a voice. Nobody had seen him, and that's why it took so many years to find him. I don't mean to sound like disrespectful, just hard pivot for a second. S. Gomez, happy birthday. I hope you had a great birthday weekend.
Early on, these attacks consisted of fondling, but over a 13-month period, the assaults grew more violent. The media dubbed the attacker the Scarborough rapist. Women were forced to perform intercourse, oral sex, and sodomy, and were sometimes beaten.
Everybody knew about the Scarborough rapist. Everybody was on their guard. And it was a nightmare for many young women. And it was a real nightmare for the women who unfortunately happened to be pounced on by him.
The Metropolitan Toronto Police Department took statements from the victims, but they couldn't get an accurate description. The women had been attacked from behind and didn't clearly see his face. All they could tell was that he was young and good-looking, with light-colored hair. Police found another common characteristic among the attacks. The attacker forced the victims to call themselves degrading names, such as slut.
Nobody had a clue who the Scarborough rapist was. The Toronto police were working diligently on the case. They'd taken as many as, I believe, 100 DNA samples from potential suspects.
In the fall of 1988, the Toronto police called an FBI profiler, Greg McCrary, to assist in the search for the Scarborough rapist. Over the next several months, McCrary analyzed police reports and was able to link 4 more attacks to the Scarborough rapist, bringing the number up to 11.
This was a very dangerous subtype of rapist. It was very anger-based, perhaps even sadistic in nature. They're rare, but they're very, very dangerous offenders.
McCrary's concerns grew as the assaults became more serious.
Not only were these women being brutalized, but we felt we're on the verge of perhaps this thing moving over the line into homicide, and that's what had everybody's attention.
Like things got worse as time went on. When these like attacks first started, they weren't even grapes. It was like groping, and it escalated and it got to grapes, and then even the grapes got more brutal, more sick. There's sick details. Like anyway, you probably can't say that on YouTube. If you want the details, you just YouTube. We're not even on YouTube. You know what I mean? The details, you can find them all online, but the boldness and the sick nature of the attacks escalated as they went on. It's like he felt untouchable, and the more he got away with it, the more untouchable he felt, until he eventually made a mistake, but it's extremely fucked. And they do say that a lot of women probably didn't come forward, and that there's quite a few more victims than were ever found.
When one sees a serial rapist, there is a high probability that they're being driven by a sexual drive that's been misdirected, and that they are going to continue to be driven in that fashion unless we intervene through catching them.
Special Agent McCrary developed a description of someone he thought police should be looking for.
We felt this was more of a high-functioning, intelligent, psychopathic, sexually sadistic sort of offender. And he lives in the Scarborough area in a dependent situation, probably with family members. Early 20s, has a violent relationship with women, even women that he's in a relationship with.
When Paul Bernardo and Karla Homolka first met in the fall of 1987, there had already been 3 attacks linked to the Scarborough rapist. Karla never suspected the man she was falling in love with could be linked to such brutal crimes.
At first, Paul Bernardo showered her with flowers, with gifts, and treated her really well. He was a considerate person. He was a considerate lover. He was a nice guy. And she flaunted him something fierce.
I just want to add something there, because this does sound a little leaning, this thing. And to say all those things, oh, he was like this and he was like this. How the fuck do we really know? We don't know. We only know based on things that what she's said. I don't believe what she says 100% at all. To say she had no idea that he could possibly be. How the fuck do we know that either? There is no way of knowing that. She's a sick individual. For all we know, he told her, and she was like down or unbothered, or God only knows. I don't think it's fair. Even just that much, just the narrators giving that much of leniency to her. We don't know. Don't be played twice by Karla Homolka. Everyone believed the innocence, right? And then they saw the tapes. There is no reason at all to believe that she didn't already know.
Paul and Karla's relationship quickly intensified, both physically and emotionally. Over the next year and a half, Paul drove to St. Catharines to visit Karla several times a week, an 80-mile trip. Her family adored him and wasn't concerned with their 6-year age difference. Like 19-year-old Karla, her parents thought Paul was a perfect catch. In the spring of 1989, Karla graduated from high school. By the fall of that year, Karla was telling friends that Paul had been verbally abusing her, but she was always quick to forgive him. That December, Paul and Karla took a romantic trip to Niagara Falls. There, he asked her to marry him. She eagerly accepted. To her parents, he seemed like an excellent choice for a husband.
He was good looking. He had ambitions to be a rap singer. He'd been trained as an accountant, had a degree from the University of Toronto. Certainly he had all the credentials to be a dream son-in-law.
They set a wedding date for the spring of 1991. May 29th, 1990. Police.
Wow, that's really interesting. Perhaps true psychopaths see the evil in each other. Anyone else would be horrified. Who knows? That's really, really interesting, though. Maybe they totally can.
Released a composite sketch of the Scarborough rapist to the media.
The composite sketch came out about the time we were doing the profile. One of the victims got a pretty good look.
When the sketch was released, friends of Paul Bernardo were stunned by what they saw.
Paul Bernardo's best friends had in fact contacted Toronto police and said this artist's concept is a ringer for Paul Bernardo.
It's funny because it definitely wasn't a ringer for Paul Bernardo in the picture they chose there to put up. But by that time, Paul had like the blonde hair and stuff, looked much more like the composite sketch than that stupid picture they put there. I don't know why they did.
During the summer of 1990, a serial rapist is terrorizing the Toronto suburb of Scarborough. Police release a composite sketch of the suspect. Metropolitan Toronto police stations are flooded with calls. The man accused of more than a dozen sexual assaults in the Scarborough area.
Oh my God, he does have a Dee haircut. You're right.
Bears a strong resemblance to Paul Bernardo. By November of 1990, several people, including Bernardo's own friends, have given his name to police after seeing the composite sketch. Police bring him in for questioning and request a DNA sample. The sample is sent to the Center of Forensic Sciences in Toronto, where it is put on a shelf with hundreds of other samples waiting for testing.
Keep in mind that DNA still, even at that time, was relatively new. It isn't what it is today. There's all sorts of different technology today that we can get DNA readings very, very quickly.
Around the time of
So they have the composite sketch because he fucked up and he let a victim see him. So they have the composite sketch and now they have his DNA. And they take his DNA and they put it on a shelf and it stays on that shelf for over 2 years.
of Paul's questioning by police, he moves from Scarborough to St. Catharines. He and his fiancée, Karla Homolka, live with her parents until they can get a place of their own. The sexual assaults in Scarborough suddenly stop, but a rash of incidents begin to occur in the St. Catharines area. Karla and her family never suspect Paul. They adore him, especially Karla's 15-year-old sister, Tammy, who looks up to him as a big brother. But soon she becomes the target of his deviant urges.
Secretly, he wasn't just the brother that she'd never had. He was also, ogling her and salivating over her, and she was the virgin that...
Oh boy, okay, hang on. Ads are playing. No fries left behind. So he's now becoming obsessed with the idea of Karla's sister because, like this guy's saying, it's the virgin version of Karla. Apparently, Karla and Tammy looked very similar, but Tammy was a virgin and Karla was not. And that's kind of what starts this whole thing. And he's being like outwardly creepy in front of Tammy with Karla there and nothing at all. Tweety, interesting. Yes, his father was. If you look into Kenneth Bernardo, he SA'd the older sister. So yes, and apparently in front of some family members. So a super fucked up family all around.
Karla wasn't.
Paul begins to pressure Karla for the one thing she's unable to give him.
While Karla wasn't a virgin, the closest person to her who was a virgin was her youngest sister, Tammy.
Desperately wanting to please Paul, Karla agrees to drug her younger sister so Paul can have sex with her.
Part of her reasoning is that she'll give him Tammy's virginity in place of her own.
It will be Karla's Christmas present to her fiancé. December 23rd, 1990. After the...
Just in case anyone missed how sick that was, her Christmas gift to her fiancé is offering up her sister. She's going to drug her sister so that he can grape for a Christmas present.
The rest of the Homolka family goes to bed. Paul and Karla invite Tammy to stay up late and have a few cocktails. What Tammy doesn't know is her drinks are laced with sleeping pills purchased by Karla.
She used an animal tranquilizer in order to keep her sedated while the two of them participated in this rape.
Karla uses another drug stolen from the veterinary clinic where she works to keep her sister unconscious. She soaks a rag with the drug halothane and keeps it over her sister's face while Paul rapes the young girl. They videotape the entire episode. All this happens while the rest of the family is asleep upstairs.
Most people videotape their family holidays and their children's first, their second, third, and so on birthday. But he liked to videotape, in his eyes, his sexual conquest.
Paul then orders Karla.
So not only, keep in mind here, okay, Karla offers up her sister as a Christmas gift. Karla steals the drugs from the vet where she works to drug her sister. Karla, on the tapes, is an active participant in what happens to her sister. And on a few of these tapes, Karla is the one with a Sharpie who wrote what was on the tape. You remember how VHS tapes were? There was that thing, that like sticker thing on the back side of it where you could write, let's say, what's on that VHS. Karla's handwriting wrote the fucking VHS sticker like things out. But no, she was a victim.
To assault her own sister.
On videotape, Paul rapes her, and so does Karla. Have sex with her own sister.
But the plan turns deadly. After Karla rapes her sister, Tammy begins to vomit and chokes. Paul and Karla quickly dress her, hide the camera, and call 911. When paramedics arrive, the couple says they had tried to revive Tammy after she passed out from drinking. Tammy is taken to the hospital, where in the early hours of Christmas Eve, she is pronounced dead.
It never crossed anybody's mind that her own sister had participated in the killing.
Although doctors find a mysterious burn mark on Tammy's face, where Karla held the halothane-soaked rag, they conclude that she died of natural causes. Paul and Karla claim the mark.
They never really looked into it. They just took their word for it.
As a rug burn caused by their attempt to revive Tammy. Karla's parents view the death of their youngest child as a tragic accident, something that could happen to any teenager.
Everybody kind of took it at face value, so to speak, and wow, accidental death. Kids do drugs, kids drink. How unfortunate, how tragic.
Her parents, while this happened, were upstairs asleep in their bedroom.
A month later, Karla and Paul move out of the Homolka house and into their own home. They move into this two-story bungalow in Port Dalhousie, a small town near St. Catharines. On the outside, they appear to be the perfect couple, but behind closed doors, Paul begins to turn his...
Well, you can tell it's an American narrating this story because he just called it Dalhousie. It's Dalhousie, and Canadians would know that.
...his aggression on Karla. He teases Karla that he is the Scarborough rapist and begins physically abusing her. Any thoughts Karla has of leaving Paul are diminished by her insecurities and fear that he will tell her parents about her involvement in Tammy's death.
In this particular case, we have a man who is a serial rapist who meets up with a woman who ultimately ends up participating in further acts of sexual abuse, and ones that are even far more serious.
Paul Bernardo had given a DNA sample to police more than 2 months earlier, but it still hadn't been tested.
Anytime offenders come into contact with the police and they don't end up in handcuffs, they're emboldened.
Whoa. Bernardo's attorney was acquitted. Why do I remember? I'm sorry, I'm going off of like 20, 15-year-old memories here, something like that. Not 2015, but like 15 to 20-year-old memories. I thought Paul Bernardo's attorney ended up going to jail. My bad if they were acquitted.
They think they're better, smarter than the police.
June 15th, 1991. 2 weeks before Karla's dream wedding, Paul wakes her up in the middle of the night with a surprise, a young girl, 14-year-old Leslie Mahaffey. He had abducted Leslie from her own backyard, luring the teenager into his car with a cigarette. Paul intends to keep Leslie as a sex slave, but her true fate will be far worse than anyone could imagine. June 15th, 1991, Port Dalhousie, Ontario. In the middle of the night, Paul Bernardo wakes up his fiancée, Karla Homolka, with a surprise. With him is 14-year-old Leslie Mahaffey, a young girl whom he abducted and intends to keep as a sex slave. Together, the couple holds the young girl captive in their home, repeatedly assaulting her, all the while recording the attacks on videotape. After less than 24 hours, they strangle her, then cut up her body and encase the pieces in concrete blocks before dumping them in nearby Lake Gibson. It is 2 weeks before their wedding.
Well, clearly the relationship between Paul and Karla was a very...
2 weeks before the wedding. So you see her crazy, dark, like sunken in eyes and stuff like that in the wedding photos. 2 weeks before the wedding.
destructive one. These are two people that fed into one another and encouraged and supported one another, would appear, in doing things that were just, in some sense, unspeakable.
On June 29, 1991, Paul Bernardo and Karla Homolka exchanged wedding vows before more than 100 friends and family members. On the same day as their fairy tale wedding, fishermen discover the dismembered body of 14-year-old Leslie Mahaffey, encased in concrete blocks. The details of the young girl's murder send shockwaves through the region.
It was gruesome. I mean, when you imagine not only who could kill a young teenage girl, but who could dismember her body, dispose of it in such an ugly and heinous way. There was this massive veil of fear right across southern Ontario.
Over the next year,
it wasn't just Ontario. At this point, okay, the story hadn't blown up like it did when they were, caught, but the story of like these crime sprees in small town Ontario, this, I don't know, it was unheard of at the time, and it was already being talked about all over the country at the time.
The Niagara Regional Police attempt to find any clues that will lead them to the killer of the teenager. They call in FBI profiler Greg McCrary to assist with the search. McCrary had been asked to help with the Scarborough rapist case more than 2 years earlier. But he has no reason to think those rapes are connected to the murder of Leslie Mahaffey. Toronto police also don't make the connection to the rash of incidents in St. Catharines, so that information is not brought to McCrary's attention.
I wish I had made that connection. I had no idea there were other rapes going on up there at the time either. Had I known that, I don't know, maybe that would have clicked for me.
While the Niagara Regional Police look for clues to Leslie's murder, Karla Homolka settles into her role as a wife. But she finds that marriage has not quenched her new husband's thirst for virgins. In fact, Paul's deviant sexual demands escalate.
After they were married,
of course they escalate. Why wouldn't they escalate? He's getting away with everything, and she's already proved to him, shown to him that she's a willing, eager participant in this shit. In his mind now, he had like a partner in crime.
married, Paul demanded that Karla get some of her sister Tammy's best friends around to the house because he wanted to drug them in the same way that they drugged Tammy.
Over the next year.
Can you imagine? The friends of Tammy now. He wants the friends of Tammy to do the same thing that he did to Tammy.
Karla entices several young girls into their home. The newlyweds drug and sexually assault the girls. But unlike Karla's sister Tammy, these girls survive, regaining consciousness with no memory of the assaults. Some of these attacks are videotaped.
He was obsessed with making himself into a star. It was very important for him to keep trophies or mementos that would confirm how successful he had been on these occasions.
With Karla's knowledge, Paul also continues to stalk women throughout the Niagara region. On April 16, 1992, Paul and Karla take an afternoon drive with the intent of bringing home a new sex slave. They are only a few miles from their own house when the couple spots 15-year-old Kristen French walking home from school. They turn into a church parking lot and wait for the...
Kristen French is the third victim, unfortunately, of the two. Yes, Karla was the bait. Karla, there was a story where Karla gets with a map as if she's lost, like she's holding a road map. And of course, a woman seeing a woman lost comes to help her out. When the woman leans in to see the map, Karla grabs her by the neck and is like pulling on her head, and Paul comes up behind her and pushes the woman into a car. So it's more than just bait. It's, again, active participant. She grabs the woman. He didn't make her do a damn thing. Karla was like into this sick shit too.
The girl to pass by.
Karla was sitting in the passenger seat of Paul's Nissan, and she said to Kristen French, excuse me, could you help us with directions? And she had a map out, and poor Kristen had no idea what...
Oh, sorry, I didn't know they were going to say the whole details. I just kind of spoiled what he's about to say. My bad.
was about to happen to her.
The couple shoves Kristen into the car and drives the short distance back to their Port Dalhousie home. It is not long before Kristen French is reported missing. Local police begin to investigate.
We have no doubt from eyewitnesses that Kristen was abducted from that parking lot.
Witnesses tell police they saw the girl with two people in the church parking lot. They also report seeing the three drive away in a beige Camaro. In response to public fear about an attacker on the prowl, the Niagara Regional Police put together a team of investigators called the Green Ribbon Task Force. They examine eyewitness accounts about a beige Camaro and reconnect with Special Agent Greg McCrary.
It was a big hunt for this beige Camaro. Eyewitnesses were rock solid about seeing this beige Camaro.
Police do not know at the time that this is a false lead. Paul Bernardo drives a gold Nissan.
It's always a dilemma for law enforcement because we know eyewitness identification. It's been shown.
Yeah. If they saw two people, why didn't they go over there? I wouldn't think it's odd asking a little girl where they are. Well, that was the thing. The way they set up the bait, it was, yeah, in the parking lot of a church, and she's acting lost, and it's like the kid just went over to help them. They didn't approach the kid. The kid went over. So even if there was a witness, yeah, the witness saw her, the two people in the parking lot, but if they saw the whole thing, would have seen the kid go over to them in the parking lot. I'm not saying there's not something fucked up about that, but again, small town Ontario, everybody gives everyone the like benefit of the doubt, eh? They would just assume, yeah, they went and gave directions. Like, only after the fact do you realize what like a red flag that is.
Time and time again to be faulty. But you've got people witnessing the abduction and describing the car. You've got to go look for that car.
The media begin to link the disappearance of Kristen French with that of Leslie Mahaffey 1 year earlier.
I'd been a reporter for maybe 15 years at the time, and all of my instinct, all of my experience told me that this was really bad, that this was going to be a major, major story.
Kristen's father appears at a press conference, offering hopeful words to his only daughter, should she be watching.
We want to know that we are thinking of you and that everything can be done is being done. And we'll get you back real quick.
Greg McCrary develops a profile of the suspect.
I described him as being a white male in his late 20s, probably with a history of sexually violent crimes, a history of domestic violence. He would beat his domestic partners.
Based on eyewitness reports that there were two offenders.
So like the profile was bang on. Everything he said was bang on, but he wasn't in the system yet. They have that fucking DNA. They're sitting on that DNA. not running the DNA. It sits there and it sits there. Between the DNA, the what do you call it? I just lost the word. The profile that this guy made on him, you'd think those two things together would have made it that much easier to find him, right? If only the DNA had been done quicker. They say, oh, DNA was new technology back then and it took all this time. But the story that we've always heard in this country wasn't that like, oh, well, they rushed and did everything they could for the DNA and it just took all that time. We have always been told the story that they took the DNA sample and they put it on a shelf and it stayed on a shelf for 2 years. I'm just repeating it the way the story is always told here. So it didn't sound like such a priority.
McCrary hopes that maybe he can get through to one of them.
If we can drive a wedge in between them, there's likely to be a falling out, and we would like to very much be able to facilitate that.
Paul and Karla keep Kristen French for several days, raping, sodomizing, and beating her. They videotape the assault to add to their collection. Finally, they strangle her. On April 30th, 1992, Kristen's body is found. Paul Bernardo has left the body of the St. Catherine's teen more than 30 miles away in the neighboring town of Burlington. Her body is discovered in a ditch near the cemetery where Leslie Mahaffey was laid to rest.
The nerve of them and the balls again, and just the confidence of like not getting caught. They drive her to a ditch right outside the cemetery where Leslie Mahaffey is buried, their first victim, or well, after Tammy. I don't mean to minimize Tammy. I'm just saying, how fucking sick can you be?
While authorities attempt to link the two cases, local media feed the public's hunger.
I mean, we covered it extensively, probably more than any other paper, but there was an audience and an appetite for that.
As the hunt for a possible serial killer monopolizes the news, Paul and Karla's relationship becomes even more violent. In January 1993, a severe beating at the hands of Paul sends Karla to the emergency room. Around the same time, the DNA samples collected more than 2 years earlier in the Scarborough rapist case are finally processed. After sorting through hundreds of samples, Paul Bernardo is identified as the man responsible for the Scarborough rapes. He is now living 80 miles away in Port Dalhousie, where Kristen French and Leslie Mahaffey were murdered.
That was a moment where I was both excited and frustrated. They had identified Paul Bernardo now as being the Scarborough rapist. And then he had moved into this area and became prime suspect, I mean, number one suspect in this case.
Bernardo had been identified and questioned based on a composite sketch of the Scarborough rapist more than 2 years earlier. At that time, he had also given a sample of his DNA.
I think he was more brazen and more aggressive than ever, thinking that for whatever reason he'd beaten the system.
Jordy Flower, that is a question that no one will ever have the answer to, because it's clearly not what they try and tell us, that like, oh, well, DNA, we just didn't have the capabilities back then to do it quickly. It sat on a shelf for 2 years. There wasn't the urgency to do it quickly. This case is fucked up in every way that a case can be fucked up.
After investigators connect the three cases, reporter Alan Cairns gets the police tip of a lifetime.
The guy said, pull your Scarborough rapist files. And I remember, no, it's the Kristen French murder. And the Leslie Mahaffey murder, he said, pull your Scarborough rapist guy files. It's the same guy. And I was stunned. Huge, huge story.
January 1993, Port Dalhousie, Ontario. Paul Bernardo and Karla Homolka get into a violent fight, landing her in the hospital with severe injuries. Paul had attacked Karla with a flashlight, leaving her with 2 black eyes, a broken rib, and severe bruising.
And they showed those pictures of Karla with her 2 black eyes, not trying to minimize or anything, but they showed us those pictures over and over again. It was like they tried to paint her as like, oh, well, she was just a victim. She's another victim of Paul. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Was she the victim of DV at the hands of Paul? Yes. Was she an active and willing participant in the rapes and murders of 3 children? Absolutely, yes. One doesn't negate the other, and it doesn't give her or excuse anything that she did. The tapes show the truth. It's so sick. I'm not telling anyone, go and watch the tapes. You can find that shit on the internet. You can see someone's face, right? When they're into something and when they're not. When they're enjoying themselves and when they're not. Karla enjoyed every minute on those tapes.
After less than 2 years of marriage, she decides to move out. Around that same time, Toronto police contact Karla to discuss the DNA results of the Scarborough rapist case. After more than a 2-year delay, officials have identified her husband, Paul Bernardo, as the Scarborough rapist. Police suspect there may be some connection to the murders of Kristen French and Leslie Mahaffey, but have few leads. To question Karla, they bring along members of the Green Ribbon Task Force, the team investigating the murders of the girls.
She thought to interview her about the domestic assault. In my opinion, they handled that interview exactly right because they didn't accuse her, they didn't overstep the bounds, but just by having Green Ribbon Task Force investigators there, that message was being communicated to her.
After the interview with authorities, Karla breaks down and confesses everything to her family.
Twin Jedi Girl, thank you for the info. I just want to put this up because I did talk mad shit. It's just infuriating that I guess that it took so long, but I had no idea about this. Local police departments did not have forensic labs in the early 90s. They had to be shipped out to central locations with a lot of backlog. There are still long backlogs on grape kits to this day. Thank you for that information. I had no idea.
She is afraid police already know or are close to discovering the couple's terrible crimes. On her parents' advice, Karla gets an attorney and tells him that Paul is the Scarborough rapist. She also admits to their being involved in the deaths of Leslie Mahaffey, Kristen French, and her own sister, Tammy Homolka. Karla holds the key to putting away one of Canada's most notorious serial rapists and killers. But she will only agree to testify against her husband in exchange for a reduced sentence for herself.
Her attorney began to cut a deal.
Narrow yarn addiction. No, they drugged her sister while her parents were asleep upstairs, and there was no sound, and she ended up choking on her vomit.
And that, of course, was of tremendous interest, to all the investigators, being able to shed some direct light on these murders and what was going on.
Karla makes a full confession to police. She confirms that Paul is the Scarborough rapist, then places complete blame on him for the deaths of all 3 girls. She says that Paul forced her to be a part of the attacks against her will. Karla also tells them that all the physical proof they need is in the couple's house, on video.
When it came together, it was the aha moment. It's the, it makes perfect sense now. That you could see that escalation, the escalation that we dreaded early on in the Scarborough rapes.
Word quickly spreads that there's been a break in 3 of Canada's biggest unsolved criminal cases: the Scarborough rapist and the murders of Kristen French and Leslie Mahaffey. Police know they have to move fast before Paul Bernardo tries to make a run for it. February 17, 1993, police arrest Paul Bernardo. Investigators begin searching his Port Dalhousie home.
I will confirm for you this morning that we have obtained the search warrant. We entered the premise and began our work.
During a 71-day search, police cannot find the videotapes, which Karla claims show the attacks on Leslie, Kristen, and Tammy. Karla's word is all prosecutors have to go on if they want to move forward and press charges against Paul Bernardo. Given her extensive knowledge of the crimes and her willingness to testify, Karla's attorney is able to arrange a plea agreement with prosecutors.
They made a deal with Karla Homolka because they had no choice. They did not have direct evidence linking Paul Bernardo to the murder victims.
So because they fucked up, they didn't, I don't know, look hard enough, look well enough, search enough, investigate enough. It was easier to make the deal with Karla than it was to build the case against him. Those tapes existed. They were going off of the belief that she was telling the truth about those tapes, but lying about the main thing in the tapes, that she was saying that the tapes were going to show that she was a victim of Paul Bernardo, and they fucking believed it, and they like went with her word.
In exchange for her testimony against her husband, Karla receives a reduced sentence for her involvement in the murders. The deal is kept secret from the public. June 28, 1993. Karla appears in court to face the charges against her. Although reporters are allowed in the courtroom, they are only allowed to report on the charges and a sentence. This restriction is uncommon in Canadian courts and frustrates many reporters.
Not just reporters, the whole country was pissed. Everybody wanted to like watch the trial and stuff, and all we were getting was like, you know, composite sketches of Karla and him and stuff after a day of testimony and stuff. It was so crazy, and the whole country was like just so mad at the whole thing going on, and so sad for what had gone on. Things like this don't happen in Canada very often. You know, it is what it is. This gripped the nation, you know, that they were so young, and it did force, I saw someone say it in the chat earlier, it forced every parent to have very, very uncomfortable conversations with their kids at a very young age about strangers and keeping safe, and you know what I mean? Everyone was terrified.
The publication ban actually spurred the media to write even more about what they didn't know, to write even more about their unanswered questions, and to stir up public indignation about the public right to know being denied.
It suddenly dawned on us how big this case was, and how brutal and how awful and how psychologically twisted this case was.
In court, Karla's attorney portrays her as an abused wife, forced to participate in her husband's criminal activities. Karla is convicted on manslaughter charges stemming from her involvement in the murders of Kristen French and Leslie Mahaffey. She receives 2 12-year
Did you hear? Manslaughter.
sentences. The terms are to be served concurrently.
12 years served concurrently. Active and willing participant. 3 grapes and schmurders. 12 fucking years.
She had received what everybody thought was described as the deal of the century. What she had participated in, though, was not generally known publicly.
The light sentence causes widespread speculation about a secret plea agreement.
Since her plea was not allowed to be publicized, it was inferred that it must have been a guilty plea.
According to the government, the plea agreement and the full facts of the case are being kept secret to ensure a fair trial for Paul Bernardo. The public is divided about being left in the dark.
Hear no justice, see no justice, speak no justice. The law's an ass.
All we need to know is that justice is served. We don't need to know what the girls went through.
Karla Homolka is sent to Kingston Prison for Women. In August of 1993, while in prison, Karla files for divorce. The next time she will see Paul is in court, testifying against him. It is then that the full shocking details of the couple's crimes will be made public.
The interest in this case was not sparked so much by the brutality of the murders. It was essentially fed by disbelief that such an attractive man and such a beautiful young girl could team up and be involved in something so bad. I mean, the Americans coined them Ken and Barbie. And, there was something to be said about that.
Ken and Barbie's darkest secrets will soon be revealed when the couple's missing videotapes finally surface. May 18th, 1995, Toronto. It's day one of Paul Bernardo's trial, one of the most anticipated murder trials in Canadian history. People line up for blocks to try and get a seat inside. Scarborough native Paul Bernardo pleads not guilty to 9 charges in connection with the deaths of Leslie Mahaffey and Kristen French, including kidnapping, unlawful confinement, aggravated sexual assault, and murder. His now ex-wife Karla Homolka is already doing time in prison for her participation in the crimes. After agreeing to testify against Paul, Karla is serving a 12-year sentence. Inside the courtroom, the day begins with some powerful new evidence for prosecutors. 6 videotapes found in the couple's home.
That was the first time that they had direct evidence against not only Paul Bernardo, but Karla Homolka.
Much to everyone's surprise, the tapes reveal a very different version of events. Karla had misled authorities about her involvement in the crimes. On the videos, she is seen fully participating in the attacks. Had the tapes surfaced earlier, they may have affected her infamous plea deal.
Is that not the most fucked up and frustrating thing you've ever heard? They're just starting his trial, and boom, and they find out. The tapes come out. Ah, surprise. Y'all fucked up. You made a deal with somebody who definitely didn't deserve a deal, and somebody who was an active participant with him at every step of the way.
The tapes were crucial evidence. They were the smoking gun.
On one tape, Karla is seen raping her own sister.
She assaulted her sister, captured on videotape. The idea that one sister would offer up a younger sister as some sort of a present without a gun being held to their head seems bizarre in the extreme. It was absolutely mind-boggling.
In court, the defense maintains that any crimes committed by Bernardo stopped short of murder.
We had this sort of history to work on, and all of his sexual assaults, the women had lived. It was only when he was in this very close interaction with Karla that they didn't. Paul Bernardo insisted from right from the beginning, and I'm sure does to this day, that he was not the killer and that Karla was.
You could argue, with the sister, anyway, Karla's sister, specifically Tammy, because it was a drug overdose, right? That technically made her vomit, and then she choked on her own vomit. You could argue there that the person who stole the drugs and then forced them on her is the schmurderer in that case, 100%.
On June 19th, 1995, Karla...
Freaking ads again. Okay. And I'm saying, not to say he's not guilty in that one too. I'm just saying better arguments could have been made against Karla. That's for damn sure. Too many damn ads. Yeah. If this is the thing with the whole tape thing, that had that first lawyer not hidden the tapes, and the government, the Crown, had those tapes from the beginning, they wouldn't have needed a plea deal from Karla, or they wouldn't have needed Karla to testify against him. They would have had it with the tapes. She would have never got her deal had his lawyer not hidden those tapes. Never. They gave her that deal so she would testify against him. They wouldn't have needed her. It's so infuriating. Y'all just tell me when the ads are over. Press play again. Isn't hiding evidence illegal? Yeah, but he was acquitted. Acquitted. I really thought he went to jail for that. He did not go to jail for that. Lawyer acquitted somehow. What a joke. Again, this case is fucked up every way that it can be fucked up. Wait, the lawyer hid them? Yeah. Yeah, the lawyer hid them, his first lawyer. And then the second lawyer is the one who turned them over. And then when Karla comes out of prison, she marries the son of her lawyer, one of her lawyers. So fucked up.
Karla Homolka goes to court to testify against her ex-husband. She tells the court that she is a victim and that Bernardo was the mastermind behind all 3 murders. On cross-examination, the defense plays the videotapes, which clearly show Karla's participation in the assaults. She uses battered wife syndrome as her explanation, a claim sharply disputed by Paul's attorney.
I'm not suggesting for a moment that she was not abused by him. What I'm saying is that she could not be classified as a person suffering from a battered spouse syndrome.
I think in battered spouse syndrome that we're talking about people having tremendous psychological abuse. As I see it, she was more of an accomplice in these horrible crimes than a victim of these crimes.
Paul Bernardo's trial lasts nearly 4 months. In an effort to spare the families more grief, the judge allows the jury to see the graphic videotapes, while the public is allowed to hear only the audio portions.
Professionally speaking, I was disappointed that we didn't see the tapes. Personally speaking, I'm glad we didn't see the tapes.
The audio reveals Paul Bernardo's modus operandi, as used in the Scarborough rape case.
He got them to repeat over and over and over again that they'll do anything he wanted, that he's the king.
After hearing the testimony of 86 witnesses, the jury...
Nary urine addiction? No, I don't know. I never heard anything about fingerprints from the victim at that time when this, anything to do with this case at all.
A jury of 8 men and 4 women deliberates for 8 hours before reaching their verdict. September 1st, 1995. 31-year-old Paul Bernardo is found guilty of all 9 charges against him, including 2 counts of first-degree murder for killing 15-year-old Kristen French and 14-year-old Leslie Mahaffey. The parents of both girls are pleased that Paul Bernardo is behind bars, but their nightmare isn't over.
Only the trial is over. Leslie is still not coming home.
Paul Bernardo is sentenced to life in prison with eligibility for parole in 25 years. After his conviction, he also confesses to the manslaughter of Karla's youngest sister, Tammy, and the sexual assaults of 14 other women in the Scarborough area. Those admissions lead the judge to declare him a dangerous offender, meaning he will likely spend the rest of his life in jail without the chance for parole.
And was supposed to stay in a maximum security place. That's part of why his name has now come up again and why Chantal even mentioned him the other day in the first place. He was secretly, and they didn't tell us anything about it, moved to a medium security facility. When everyone found out, everyone in the country lost their shit.
Controversy sort of rages around. Was Karla given too light a sentence? Did she get off on this thing, so to speak, get off way too lightly? And that's certainly the opinion of a lot of folks that she is. I have my concern that she may be more psychopathic than Paul.
Interesting. A lot of people think so.
Even though Karla Homolka misled authorities about her role in the assaults, prosecutors decide not to challenge the plea agreement. The decision, they say, is final.
I'm not a lawyer, but as I understand the law, once the deal was cut in Canada, they had to honor the deal.
Karla's plea deal becomes known as one of the worst in Canadian history. The media call it the deal with the devil. The controversy surrounding the Paul Bernardo and Karla Homolka crimes does not end with the verdicts. The following year, the Ontario court releases the results of a 6-month-long inquiry into the police handling of the Paul Bernardo case. They conclude that the investigation was hampered by numerous mistakes and that Paul Bernardo fell through the cracks simply by moving from one community to another. Since the inquiry, Canadian authorities implemented a new system specifically for tracking serial predators. Their goal is to improve communication among police departments. On July 4th, 2005, 35-year-old Karla is released from prison after serving 12 years behind bars. Although she served her full sentence, some feel that was not long enough for the role she played in the crimes.
No, not some. That some feel. Everybody feels like that's not long enough. Everybody unanimous about this one. The whole country. There's a reason it's known as like the worst deal that the government ever made. The deal with the devil. It's not for nothing. You know, it's a joke. 3 children. And she facilitated the grape of another whole batch of women. You know, just psychotic. You can't convince me she didn't know about him when it came to just the grapes. No. I'm sure he told her. This is interesting. Do you think she would be a schmurderer if she never met him? Yeah, I do. I think they both would have been.
My personal feeling is she got off light. I think that she has more culpability for this than she was punished for. But she's out. And so all we can do now is hope that she doesn't harm anyone else.
Unable to comfortably return to her hometown of St. Catharines, Karla Homolka decides to start her life over in French-speaking Montreal.
And my city goes, fuck! This bitch comes out of jail and comes here, hatches up with someone, and she's just living in Montreal. And more than living in Montreal, she was volunteering at an elementary school. I'm not even kidding.
She could come out in Quebec, basically an unknown person, and she could get on with her life and become a normal person, and that's exactly what she's tried to do.
Karla says she still has nightmares about the girls and feels remorse.
Oh God, this picture of her. Oh, pity me. She went on French TV. She was interviewed. It was a whole stupid thing. Well, I don't know if it was on French TV or if I just watched on French TV, trying still to act the victim after all these years when she came out.
For what she did.
She should be scrutinized. She shouldn't just be allowed to, ride off into the sunset.
In February of 2007, less than 2 years after her release from prison, Karla Homolka gave birth to a baby boy.
Karla Homolka has a tough life ahead. How do you deal with what happened there? And how on earth is she going to break it to her child what happened?
She's out there in the community. And so we all, not only for her sake, but for all of our sakes, have to hope that she's going to do well.
From my perspective, she had served her sentence. It was she's entitled to be released, and she's entitled to go about her life as best she can. And that's the way this system is. Would I want her living next door? No.
Canada's notorious schoolgirl killer is an occasional volunteer at a Montreal school. City News has learned Karla Homolka has been in the classroom and on a field trip. Dominic Fazioli tells us why the school didn't do a background check.
Karla Homolka is one of Canada's most notorious criminals. Along with her then-husband, Paul Bernardo, she played a role in the sex killings of 2 schoolgirls and her 15-year-old sister. Since her release from prison, parents have opposed her presence outside schools, including her children's schools. Last year, there was a backlash in Chateauguay, and now she's facing resistance in Montreal's NDG district.
Yeah, that's right. NDG! Karla Homolka, dumbass, really thought she would be anonymous in this city. The nerve.
Can I talk to you for a second?
No, you can't.
Since September, Homolka has been a regular fixture at Greaves Adventist Academy, a private Christian school.
We don't want her there. We don't want her in the school.
Lily is a concerned parent at the NDG school. She doesn't want her face shown.
NDG is my neighborhood. The neighborhood I grew up in, the neighborhood I've always lived in, Notre Dame de Grâce.
Says Homolka does more than just drop off and pick up her kids. She claims Homolka occasionally volunteers at the school. Several sources connected with the school say that on March 22nd, Homolka helped supervise a group of kindergarten students during a field trip to the Montreal Science Center.
How would you feel knowing that your child is interacting with a person who's a serial killer? It's not right.
Those same sources say Homolka has even been inside the school from time to time. She's even brought her dog into the classroom for children to pet.
She's not supposed to be there. Why is she allowed to be in the school?
Lily says many parents have spoken to the school principal, but nothing has changed. We spoke with Homolka last week.
Karla, can I ask you a question? Do you volunteer or work at the school?
Who are you?
You know who I am.
No, I don't know who we are. Who are you?
I'm a news reporter.
Well, good for you.
By law, before anyone can have regular contact with children in Quebec schools, they are required to undergo a criminal background check. Our questions to the school about if this protocol was followed were not answered. But the Seventh-day Adventist Church in Canada, who runs the school, says the school board was fully aware of who Homolka is and that she is not a regular volunteer and can never be alone with children in school or churches.
My lawyer will be in contact with you.
Thank you, Karla.
A statement sent to us Tuesday afternoon reads in part, the Quebec Conference of Seventh-day Adventists and the administration of Greaves Adventist Academy are committed to providing quality education and enriching learning experiences to its students. While we work through the concerns stated by parents and other stakeholders, we welcome those associated with the school to contact the Quebec Conference Office of Education. Dominic Fazioli, Breakfast Television, Montreal.